Okay, and a very good evening to you, everybody. Welcome back to Exploring the Lord of the Rings. I'm excited to be back home and broadcasting with you guys again. I had a great week off, but I missed hanging out with you guys, so I'm glad to get back to tearing our way through the text, especially since in our last class we got right up to the song and then had to stop. So I'm looking forward to doing the Cat and the Fiddle. And I heard that our group of minstrels here before class was performing the Cat and the Fiddle for you. I'm gonna play the arrangement that we had made up for us here by Steve this past week, as he said he would do last time. So thanks for that, Steve. I really appreciated that. I'm gonna play that. Hopefully you'll be able. I think I have things set up so that you can hear it. Cool. So all right, I'm gonna. So tonight's class is called Being Inconspicuous Very Badly. Frodo does a pretty good job of showing you how not to go on the lam if ever you yourself are running for your life and hiding. Don't do it like Frodo did. Before we start, two quick announcements. Three quick announcements. First, just to keep everybody to remind everybody or inform you if you don't know, we're about to have daylight savings time this coming weekend. We change our clocks around here this coming weekend. I know it's different in different countries and if you live in Arizona and that kind of thing, but just keep in mind that we're going to do that. That means that if you live in a foreign country or in Arizona, then keep in mind that the classes next week are going to be at a different time. So just be warned, things are going to change. So daylight savings this coming Sunday. Second thing is next week, March 15th is the deadline for the call for papers, call for presentations for Mythmoot. So if you want to come to Mythmoot 5, and you're thinking about maybe giving a paper, wanting to propose a panel, suggesting some kind of activity, you can totally still do that. But the deadline is approaching. The deadline is March 15th, so you have until next week to propose something awesome for Mythmoot to contribute in that way to the awesomeness that is going to be Mythmoot 5, which I am so much looking forward to. So just to keep in mind that is on the way. The second thing, sorry, I'm finding my volume is really high for some reason. It's in my ear, and I'm like, I'm hearing music. Okay, sorry. My third quick announcement is just a reminder that London Moot is coming. It is our next regional moot that is coming up April 28th in London. I encourage you to go to londonmoot.com and register if you can possibly make it over to London. So excited to get over to Europe and to get to hang out with some folks over there. So I hope to be able to meet many of you. So don't forget about that. All right. That's it, and I am ready for some more discussion here tonight. Two questions from the discussion board before we get back to the song. This one is a bit of a flashback back to chapter 1. In part, this is me still feeling guilty about going so quick with you, chapter 1. But I wanted to, this one just came in, but I wanted to respond to it because I actually spent, during the week that I was away, I spent a lot of time with this scene again. I sat down with chapter 1 and was thinking a lot about Fellowship of the Ring chapter 1 while I was on vacation, like you do. And so I was just reading this passage really, really carefully a couple days before I got this question. So I was like, hey, I'm going to talk about it. So, so Veranda was asking, in light of the fact that Bilbo held possession of the One Ring for 50 plus years, if he had claimed the ring full on when he and Gandalf were having their spat at Bag End before he finally relented and gave the ring away, could he have bested Gandalf, or is the power of the ring dependent on the original power of the wearer? Was Gandalf ever worried? Okay. One, Bilbo totally does claim the ring. He claims that the ring as full on as it's possible to claim it. In fact, that's the entire premise of what's going on through that whole scene. When you look at Bilbo's dialogue throughout that, what he's saying again and again is that the ring is mine, I won't give it away. This is why he goes on to calling it his precious, right? It is the, articulating that it is not only just repeating, he's not just repeating Gollum, he's articulating that it's the most important thing in the world to him, right? Anyway, so he does claim it. He totally claims it. Is Gandalf worried? Well, yeah, Gandalf's worried. Not worried that Bilbo's gonna mop the floor with him, because it's not gonna. It's exactly, Jake, exactly as you were just suggesting in the Twitch chat there. Gandalf is worried, but he's worried about Bilbo. He's not worried for his own self, right? So, is Bilbo able to, make use of the power of the ring in order to dominate the wills of others? Is he gonna, having claimed the ring, as again, he's clearly claiming the ring in as strong and thorough terms as is possible for him to do at that point. Having claimed the ring, is it possible for him to use its power to dominate the will of Gandalf? No, he can't do that, just because he doesn't know how. Remember, this is gonna come up way down the road, when Frodo is talking to Galadriel, right? And he's asking her, he's like, why are not like the your thoughts laid bare before me, right? Because I'm permitted to wield the One Ring, and like if you say Sauron will know all these things if he gets the One Ring, why don't I know them, right? I mean, it's a great question from Frodo, and you'll remember Galadriel's response is going to be, you haven't tried. Don't try, she says, right? That is, and she goes on to explain that she has to, he in order to use the power of the ring like that, he would have to train his will to the domination of others, right? He has to get himself thinking in that way. Now, Bilbo claims the ring for himself, but he's never used the ring to try to dominate the will of others, right? This sort of confrontation that he's having with Gandalf is the first time that's ever even been anywhere close to on the table, right? Bilbo had only ever tried to use the ring to make himself invisible and to vanish away, especially when the Sackville Bagginses or goblins or whatever, or dragons come by, right? So anyway, so that's so yes, so he does claim it. He does sort of use it, but he's not gonna, and yes, it is dependent on the original power of the wearer. Not just anybody who picks up the ring has the ability to overthrow Sauron with it. One thing that I would sort of add, at the risk of opening up a sort of a bigger can of worms here, this is one of the things, if I had to, apart from the normal things, like the horrible things done to Faramir and Treebeard and that kind of thing in the Peter Jackson adaptation of The Lord of the Rings, if I had to complain about one other, if I had to make a short list of things, like sort of big picture things that I was disappointed by in that adaptation, one of the things that I was most disappointed by, and it's kind of a sort of a small thing, and I don't usually talk about it that much, the choice that they made to merely say that the ring is non-functional for people, right? That when people like Boromir would say, we should use the power of the ring against the enemy, within the film adaptation, they were just like, we can't. It won't work for us, right? Like it's, so that everybody like Boromir, who convinces themselves that they can take the ring and wield it, they are merely deluding themselves. Within film world, within Peter Jackson's adaptation, that is a mere delusion on their part. They're absolutely fooling themselves, because it is in fact impossible, apparently, we're told, impossible for anybody but Sauron to use it. And that, I think, is a very... to me, very, very disappointing oversimplification of the situation, right? The thing about the ring is that, of course, lots of people can use it. Anybody can use it, right? It's just, for many, they can't use it much or do much with it. They'll do much more harm to themselves than they'll do to anybody else. And you have to like attune yourself to the ring, right? You have to get your own will to be doing the kinds of things that the ring wants you to do, right? In order for you to gain in the power to do that. we know that Frodo is going to grow. Frodo is going to come to a place where he can use the ring. Can he overthrow Sauron? No. Frodo's not going to be capable of overthrowing Sauron. But it is certainly possible that others could, right? It's very clear. Galadriel could take the ring and overthrow Sauron. Gandalf could take the ring and overthrow Sauron. Aragorn could take the ring and overthrow Sauron. Denethor could make a good go of it. Better probably even than Saruman, who definitely thinks he could use the ring to overthrow Saruman. Anyway, yeah. Yeah, exactly, JJ. That's exactly why Sauron is worried when the host approaches the Black Gate, because he thinks that the new Ring Lord is coming for him. Absolutely. Yeah, good. It is, Mad Violinist, I wonder. It is an interesting question to me. What would have happened to Boromir? I mean, nothing good. Like, had Boromir taken the ring, he obviously, things wouldn't have panned out. Did Boromir have the strength to actually accomplish what his fantasy led him to think he could do? I would say no. I don't think he does. I think Faramir could. I don't think Boromir could. I think that Boromir's cool, but he's the wrong sort of cool. He does not have the wherewithal. I think that the implications that both Denethor and Faramir are different. They're more like Aragorn. They have, the blood of Númenor runs true in them and stuff. Anyway, yeah. So Aragorn clearly, Gandalf clearly, Faramir probably, Denethor probably. Remember, Denethor already does better even than Saruman with the Palantir, right? I mean, they both get into trouble, right? But when it comes to a sort of a struggle of wills with Sauron through the Palantir, Denethor kind of comes out better in that test. He fails it, but doesn't bomb it as completely as Saruman does. Anyway, we'll see. Yeah. Now it's interesting. Fourth Thought was suggesting that Denethor succeeds better than Saruman because he had a greater right to wield it as the lawful steward. Possibly, yeah. It's foolish for the steward to look into the ring of Minas Anor, the Palantir of Minas Anor, but does he have the right to do it? Yeah, sure, yeah, he does. And Aragorn does suggest that right matters, right? Yeah. Yeah, cool. Yeah, Matt says he suspects Boromir would have made it to the Black Gate after defeating the Witch King and then lost to Sauron. I can see that. I mean, I don't think he could overthrow Sauron. I just don't think he could. Anyway, okay. Let's. But we're getting way ahead of ourselves now. But anyway, yeah, as I said, I wanted to address this because I was just this was timely for me because this passage was just on my mind again. Okay. Second one, just a quick observation from Lincoln, which I thought was a great observation. He says, for some reason, I always found it deeply heartwarming the way the Underhills of Bree are described taking Frodo into their hearts as a long-lost cousin. It's not just a mistaken recognition of distant relatedness, it's an instant welcoming and embracing based solely on this supposed distant kinship. It says a lot about the attitude and values of the Shire hobbits in only a short sentence, and all of it to their credit. I agree. I think it's a wonderful little touch. Lincoln, exactly as you say, it's not only that they assume they must be related, right, but how they respond upon finding that they're related. There's no, it's like they just need an excuse, right, and it can be a kind of a thin excuse, right, but given even a thin excuse, they're ready to take him to his heart as a long lost cousin, right. And I agree. I think that really shows us something, and it's interesting to me, especially because it's a little, potentially anyway, a little bit different than what we see in the Shire, right? Remember the pattern in the Shire is for people in one part of the Shire to be suspicious of anybody who, to believe, largely assume, because it's often without much data, that people who live, more than 20 miles away are weird, right? And they're suspicious and dubious of people who live far away. So here are the Bree Underhills, right? Finding that there's this Underhill from the Shire. They don't know anything about him, right? That's way farther away than Buckland is from Bag End, and yet, from Hobbiton, and yet, instead of being like, oh, you're one of those weird Underhills, they immediately embrace him. And I think that's cool. It does suggest something really interesting to me, and it makes me wonder: are the Bree hobbits in fact more welcoming than the Shire hobbits? Right, and I think they might be. So I don't know. I mean, now it is. It is true that members of families can be spread out. So, maybe you could say, well, a Shire hobbit would probably not think a member of, a long lost member of their own family was queer just because they lived far away. Maybe, but I don't know. I mean, again, that might be true of hobbits that are already kind of countercultural in this way, like the Tooks and the Brandybucks, right? But, I don't know. Just again thinking about Chapter 1, the invitations to Bilbo, to Bilbo's party, the fact that he's inviting people from all over the Shire and some even from outside the borders, is treated as an oddity, right? It's a weirdness. So Kyle, I agree. Bree as a whole does seem to be more open to outsiders in that way. So it would make sense that the hobbits of Bree are more open to that as well. I agree. And JJ, you're right that Sam trusts his cousin up in the North Farthing, right? Yes. Now they're very close family, right? So we're not talking about like somebody from a distant branch of the family who's from the North Farthing. You're talking about his cousin, right? And I mean, even his brothers don't live at home. Sam is the youngest son, not the only son, and not the oldest son of Hamfast Gamgee. He's the youngest son. He's the one who lives home with Dad, right? That's why it's his responsibility to take care of Dad, not because he's the oldest son and the heir of his father, but because he's the youngest one who got left behind with Dad while the others kind of went out to do their thing. Anyway, yeah, I think it's clearly different. Sam knows, his close family and doesn't think they're strange just because they live up in the North Farthing. But if there were like a new branch of the Gamgee family that was discovered, right, and you learn that they're some very remote, distant relation of yours, but they're from, the North Farthing or something, would he be dubious of them? Would he trust them instantly and immediately? Would he take them to his heart in the same way? Maybe. I'm not sure. We don't have too much evidence about that, but the evidence that we do have seems to be against it, that I think it might be fair to say that the Bree hobbits are more welcoming. Yeah, and Matt was just asking about the same thing too. And yeah, Tony, I agree. The whole living in a mixed species town at a crossroads, right, does suggest that there's sort of that tendency to be really parochial, right, to be to consider anybody who lives more than 20 miles away, strange, is likely to be more common in the Shire, I think, than in Bree. Yeah. Anyway, okay, all right. So, good observations. Let's get to the song. Okay, are we ready? So I just wanted to, we looked at this slide briefly last time, but I just wanted to, because we need the lead in again, so I wanted to read this, and it's been forever. Okay, everyone in the room was now looking at him. "A song!" shouted one of the hobbits. "A song! A song!" shouted all the others. "Come on now, master, sing us something that we haven't heard before." For a moment Frodo stood gaping. Then in desperation he began a ridiculous song that Bilbo had been rather fond of, and indeed rather proud of, for he had made up the words himself. It was about an inn, and that is probably why it came into Frodo's mind just then. Here it is in full. Only a few words of it are now, as a rule, remembered. By the way, that last line is really interesting, right? I mean, that's a really fun line, and I've always loved that line. But notice for a second who's speaking there, right? This is a really interesting moment because here we have the modern narrator speaking to us in a way that we have rarely gotten since chapter 1, right? Exactly, Aerocab. This is the same person who mentions express trains, right? This is the modern 20th century narrator, who, translator of the text, who is compiling and translating the documents, right, that have come into his possession. And there are very few places where we can point very clearly to that voice, right? That voice was fairly common in The Hobbit, right? Remember all those times in The Hobbit when the narrator addresses the reader, right? Saying things like in the riddle game, right? Saying things like, I expect that you know the answer or can guess it as easy as blinking, right? Remember that? But of course you don't have being eaten to trouble your thinking and all that stuff. So that kind of tactic where the narrator is speaking directly to the reader, we don't see that even much in chapter 1. And we've not gotten much. So one of the reasons I wanted to draw attention to that last sentence. Sometimes when you hear people talk about this, people will exaggerate this a little bit. That is to say that this narrator, the voice of this narrator, vanishes after like chapter 1, or at least after chapter 3. I don't think so. I clearly not, right? Here he is again. And it's a good reminder that we do have several layers to kind of think through. There are going to be times when we're going to see the storyteller, like the Hobbit narrator, Frodo, Sam, a later writer, maybe Finnegill, King's writer, right? But somebody from the cultural context of the text, but clearly writing after the fact, right? We'll get some of that in some places. But we still also have, on top of that, this additional layer. We have to remember that all this stuff is being mediated to us by a modern translator, by a modern narrator. And occasionally we will see a recollection of that, a direct reminder of that modern narrator's existence. And yeah, Matt, I agree. The tone does sound very much like the tone. That's exactly the point that I wanted to make. It isn't only the fact that by saying things like now, only a few words of it are now, as a rule, remembered, now being the modern era, not the time of the story, or even in the generations afterwards, but in the modern world, in the 19th or 20th century, wherever the narrator is actually located, 20th century, I'd assume. That's the now, clearly, that he's referring to. But I agree, as Matt's saying, it's not just that fact. It's not just the mere fact that it's the modern narrator speaking. It is also the tone, right? This is fun. And it's fun in the same way that those passages in chapter 1 are fun. I do love, as a rule, Tom, I agree. And the tone there is very similar to the sort of the fun way of speaking that the narrator so often has in chapter 1, right? The only a few words of it are now, as a rule, remembered, is a very similar kind of tone to, the wonderful sentence in chapter 1 about apparently perpetual youth as well as reputedly inexhaustible wealth, right? that sort of, or the sentence about people coming by arrangement to remove the guests who had inadvertently remained behind, right? There's many places where the narrator is having fun, but speaking in that kind of sort of a dry humor voice, which I really like. Now, Mad Violinist, see, I'm a little less clear. The Mad Violinist asks, do we think that this narrator is also speaking during the description of Bree at the beginning of this chapter? That, I think, is less clear. That could very easily be like what I would call the Hobbit narrators, that is, the authors of the text. If we think about if we simplify it, we have to be careful because it's not necessarily, this is a simplification, right? But if we simplify it into thinking of 3 levels of the text, right? First being the level of the characters themselves, right? The level of the immediate action of the story. The second being the level of the authors of the text, Frodo, Sam, the authors of the text and their editors, right? And then above that, the third level being the modern narrator who has discovered these texts and is translating them and presenting them to us, the modern readers, right? As I say, it's a simplification because we have extra layers in the middle, right? Not just the hobbits who wrote the text, but like Findegil, King's writer of Gondor, who then redacted the text afterwards and everything. So, but for simplicity's sake, we can think about those 3 layers. And it's often difficult to prove. But the Bree introduction sounds to me like the second layer, not the third, right? It sounds like it would be the intermediate, the author, or the, I shouldn't call it the author. We should call Tolkien the author, the writer of the text. If we call these the characters, the writers, the translator, and then we think about Tolkien as author behind the whole thing, maybe if I can attempt to be consistent with that terminology, it would be helpful. Yeah. Now see, but Tony, I have a hard enough time being able to feel very confident that we can distinguish between level 2 and level 3, right? Between the writers and the translator, to be able to try to guess whether we're hearing the writers or the editors, or like what level of editors within that, second layer, as I was describing it, we're getting. It would be challenging, right? Where would I place the Buckland introduction? On that second layer as well, right? This is the kind of fun game to play. This is the kind of fun game that Tolkien practically invites us to play with his note on the Shire records at the beginning of in the prologue, right? Where he's telling us about the different history of the texts that went into making up this book. And of course, it's exactly the kind of game that scholars so often play, especially with old manuscripts and texts and things, right? The different editorial layers that kind of underlie it. And you can start making exactly the kind of argument, Mad Violinist, that you were just making, like the Buckland description and the Bree descriptions are stylistically similar, right? So then you start thinking, okay, there's this one narrator or editorial level who's really interested in these kinds of descriptions, right? And then you can, so if you sort of theorize, okay, like the Gondorian scribe, maybe the Gondorian scribe was really interested in these kinds of details, right? So every time, but we can't really be confident. And I would also say, by the way, that when I find this kind of thing being done, like to medieval texts and things, I find it's usually, I usually find that those arguments, they sound to me oversimplified, right? They tend to want to sort of make, to draw what seem to me simplistic conclusions, but to use genuine textual evidence, but to from that textual evidence draw what strikes me as fairly simplistic textual conclusions. Anyway, But yeah. Yeah, both Eric Hebb and Matt DeForest were just thinking about what would happen if we run these different passages through the Lexos program, Mike Drout's Lexos program, which studies exactly this kind of thing, looking at recurrent patterns of language usage and things, and see if we can, we could find evidence for different layers of the text. Yeah, it would be interesting to do that. And I mean, yeah, I don't know. I too would be interested to see what we would find if we did that. It's a really fascinating tool. Yeah, Mike, see, exactly. Mike is saying, you start from a conclusion and then find the evidence to match. That's exactly what I have often felt was happening with many of those kinds of situations. But anyhow, yeah, so I don't want to me, trying to get too granular in identifying the narrative levels seems to me not very useful. But those distinctions of the three levels, right? Modern translator, contemporary writer / editor, characters within the text, right? Those three levels, I think, are generally distinguishable and important to distinguish, because each one of those three groupings are operating from a totally different framework. So one thing that I just want to do here is to point out the modern translator is peeking through here. He's not gone. And having reminded us of his presence, right, we should be alert for other moments when he peeks through again. Yeah, we'll, I'm sure, come back to this at different times. But yeah, my very quick observation, the demise of the narrators, of the narrative voice from chapter 1 has been exaggerated, right? He's definitely not dead. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's keep going. Let's talk about the song. A song. Okay. I talked about the title. This is the title I put here is the original title that this poem was published under when Tolkien published it in the 1920s. A Nursery Rhyme Undone and Its Scandalous Secret Unlocked. I think that's just wonderful. But I'm gonna play it now. So if I set this up properly, you will be able to hear this on Twitch. And you should be able to hear it in Discord too. If I set this up properly.
There is an inn, a merry old inn, beneath an old grey hill, and there they brew a beer so brown that the man in the moon himself came down one night to drink his fill. The ostler has a tipsy cat that plays a 5-string fiddle, and up and down he runs his bow, now squeaking high, now purring low, now sawing in the middle. The landlord keeps a little dog that is mighty fond of jokes. When there's good cheer among the guests, he cocks an ear at all the jests and laughs until he chokes. They also keep a horned cow as proud as any queen, but music turns her head like ale and makes her wave her tufted tail and dance upon the green. And oh, the rows of silver dishes and the store of silver spoons, for Sunday there's a special pair, and these they polish up with care on Saturday afternoons. The man in the moon was drinking deep and the cat began to wail. A dish and a spoon on the table danced, the cow in the garden madly pranced, and the little dog chased his tail. The man in the moon took another mug, then rolled beneath his chair, and there he dozed and dreamed of ale, till in the sky the stars were pale and dawn was in the air. Then the ostler said to his tipsy cat, the white horses of the moon, they neigh and champ their silver bits, but their master's been and drowned his wits, and the sun'll be rising soon. So the cat on his fiddle played hey diddle diddle, a jig that would wake the dead. He squeaked and sawed and quickened the tune, while the landlord shook the man in the moon. It's after 3, he said. They rolled the man slowly up the hill and bundled him into the moon, while his horses galloped up in rear and the cow came capering like a deer, and a dish ran up with a spoon. Now quicker the fiddle went diddle-dum-diddle, the dog began to roar. The cow and the horses stood on their heads, the guests all bounded from their beds and danced upon the floor. With a pig and a pong, the fiddle strings broke, the cow jumped over the moon, and the little dog laughed to see such fun, and the Saturday dish went off at a run with the silver Sunday spoon. The round moon rolled behind the hill as the sun raised up her head. She hardly believed her fiery eyes, for though it was day, to her surprise they all went back to bed.
All right. Excellent. Here, let me make sure it doesn't move on to something else. Okay, cool. Very good. Okay, so I hope that you could hear that reasonably well. First, let's. So I love to be able to get it with music, right? And to hear it sung as it should be sung. Okay. First, what do you notice about the shape of this song, right? We should look at the structure, right, even before we start thinking about the content here. Let's look at each stanza. It's obviously in stanzas, right? And each stanza is pretty much the same. There are some variations, local variations in rhythm of particular lines and things, but in general, it's very regular, right? What's the shape? What's the structure? It's a really simple but cool shape, right? So listen to the rhythm. Tell me what you notice about the rhythm and rhyme scheme. There is an inn, a merry old inn, beneath an old grey hill, and there they brew a beer so brown that the man in the moon himself came down one night to drink his fill. What do you hear? What meter is it in? Okay, yes, it's iambic, right? It's definitely iambic, though that's irregular, right? In some places, he plays with that, right? There is an inn, a merry old inn, right? A merry old inn is a great example of the kind of variation that we get locally within lines, right? So yeah, it's mostly an iambic tetrameter, yes. 4 main beats in the line, right? There is an inn, a merry old inn, beneath an old grey hill. Oops, only 3 there. And there they brew a beer so brown that the man in the moon himself came down one night to drink his fill. 4 beats, 3 beats, 4 beats, 4 beats, 3 beats, right? Okay, so alternating between 3 and 4, oh wait, except it's not. We get those 2 lines with 4 in a row, right, in the middle. So what we get here, in fact, is not exactly iambic tetrameter, right? Iambic tetrameter, one of the sort of famous things about iambic tetrameter is that it's really like regular and sing-songy, right? Sort of read enough regular iambic tetrameter aloud and you'll start going like this without you being able to help it, right? This has a very different rhythm than just a regular iambic tetrameter. Notice if you just skip the middle line, right? If you skip the middle line, how does it sound? There is an inn, a merry old inn, beneath an old grey hill, that the man in the moon himself came down one night to drink his fill, right? Those sound like 2 7-beat lines, which rhyme at the end, right? The 4-3-4-3 tetrameter, trimeter pairing, that's really common in Tolkien's poetry. Tolkien loves heptameter lines, right? He loves 7 beats in a line, or if he doesn't do it in a single line, he'll do it like this. He'll do 4-3 alternating, 4-3 alternating. So, and it gives, and often we'll see him link them with rhyme like this, as if it were 2 instead of 4 lines, right? Of 4-3 4-3. It's like 2 lines of 7-7, right? That rhyme that are a rhyming couplet, hill and fill. That's very common for Tolkien, but it's not just that either, right? There's that extra line in the middle, right? The one that I skipped when I was just reading through, that extra tetrameter line, which is not paired with a trimeter line. So we break the pattern of 7. But instead it's tied together, right? By internal rhyme with the first half of the end. So we've got the first 2 lines and the last 2 lines, which are joined with rhyme, right? But then you've got lines 3 and 4, which are joined by rhyme, which has the effect of sounding like an internal rhyme, right? And there they brew a beer so brown that the man in the moon himself came down one night to drink his fill. It sounds like internal rhyme because, again, came down doesn't sound, when you're just listening to it, it doesn't even sound like the end of the line, right? There is an inn, a merry old inn beneath an old grey hill, and there they brew a beer so brown that the man in the moon himself came down one night to drink his fill. It sounds like 2 long lines with the short line in the middle, but with the internal rhyme on that short line. So I really like how they how the different parts of the stanza all kind of hold together. The one thing that sort of stands out, and Tony, you were pointing this out earlier, there's no rhyme for the first line, right? And what's the effect of that? The effect of that is to again make it sound like that 7-beat line. It doesn't sound like the end of a line, right? Because the rhyming bit is the part that comes at the end of the trimeter line, line 2. Line 1 doesn't have any rhyming pair at all. So the way that we get this sort of the longer lines and then that sort of quick repetition in the middle with the internal rhyme, and up and down he runs his bow, now squeaking high, now purring low, now sawing in the middle, right? When there's good cheer among the guests, he cocks an ear at all the jests and laughs until he chokes, right? That sort of shorter tetrameter line with the internal rhyme in the middle of the stanza. I love the thoughts that you guys are having. Tony is saying you could musically you could play this as 5/4 time and it would line up. That would be interesting. It's I mean the way that I think about it. See, again, I'm not sure about the 5/4 thing too, if that would line up properly, if it would work out exactly. But it's the effect for me is this combination of regularity and irregularity, right? On the one hand, it's the stanza structures are all tied together, and stanza structures. I love I love rhyme structures of stanzas. They're really fun to play with, and poets can use those to create some really fun effects within stanzas. We see this, there's a lot of really great stanzaic poetry written, especially earlier on, like Chaucer's Rhyme Royal stanza, like Spenser's Fairy Queen stanza, where you can establish what looks like a simple pattern becomes a more complicated pattern, and so enables you to kind of tie one part of the stanza with another part of the stanza, right? You'll have the so again, like here again we have this what has the effect of a kind of expansion, right? Of the second, again it's like two long rhyming lines, except we're drawing out the second one, right? Regular but kind of irregular, right? It's the fact that it's a 5-line stanza makes it sort of by necessity a little bit irregular, right? Because it's not just quatrains, it's not just alternating like the rhyme scheme A-B or something like that. It's not going to have that same kind of regular sort of pattern, if you see what I mean by that. Anyway, so there's lots to think about here. Again, it's not super complex, right? But it's really interesting to think about that stanza structure. And to me, one of the primary effects of that is that it really invites me to think about the beginning and the end of the stanzas together, right? That line of that rhyme of line 2 and the rhyme of line 5 necessarily kind of connect the opening and concluding concepts of the stanza. And then we have as a second sort of internal movement within each stanza that internal rhyme in the middle, right? Lines 3 and 4. And so those are kind of two. That's the general shape of the poem, right? Let's look at another random stanza, right? And oh, the rows of silver dishes and the store of silver spoons. For Sunday there's a special pair, and these they polish up with care on Saturday afternoons, right? So we have first the concept of, we begin the stanza by introducing the dishes and spoons, right? And then we end the stanza by talking about how they're polished on Saturday afternoons, right? So we get the Saturday and Sunday thing. But in the middle, we sort of dilate on that one idea of the special pair of dishes on Sunday. And these they polish up with care on Saturday afternoons. So we come back to the Saturday afternoons at the end, but we have in the middle, we have like the specialness of Sunday, right? We're going to pause for a second and look at the Sunday dishes, right? What makes the Sunday dishes special, right? Yeah, and Erocab, you're right. The enjambment of these lines, again, making them feel like long lines rather than short lines, right? For Sunday, there's a special pair, and these they polish up with care on Saturday afternoons. That whole thing is a sentence, right? Those last 3 lines are all one sentence, but you'll notice there's stronger enjambment between lines 4 and 5, right? You pause at the end of line 3. You don't stop, but you pause. For Sunday, there's a special pair, and these they polish up with care on Saturday afternoons. You don't pause at all between lines 4 and 5. It's like it's one long line. Brick tells there's no explanation as to why Sunday would be a special day in a pre-Christian world. There's no explanation of that. But that mere fact, right? The mere fact that this song is kind of not taking for granted, like it's within a Christian context, you wouldn't have to explain that there's a special pair of dishes for Sunday, right? You just, any more than the original Nursery Rhyme does, right? The silver Sunday spoon, right? It just mentions the silver Sunday spoon, and you're supposed to know about that, right? But anyway, yeah, so it tells us, right? For Sunday, there's a special pair, and these they polish up with care on Saturday afternoons. Why? We don't know, right? But it is emphasized that should happen. And yes, exactly, Tom. And Fourth Dauntless was also pointing this out too. The Saturday-Sunday thing is an artifact of translation, right? It's not actually Saturday and Sunday are not the actual names in the original, Westron. That's not what they were saying, right? But the translator has rendered it into Saturday and Sunday so that we'll understand, right? So that it fits. Good. Okay. What else was I thinking? Let's think more about the story now. Having thought some about the shape and the sound, what is this song about? Ultimately, what is this song? What are we getting here? Notice where we begin. There is an inn, a merry old inn, beneath an old grey hill, and there they brew a beer so brown that the man in the moon himself came down one night to drink his fill. Notice the moment when the song, oops, sorry, I went AFK. Notice the moment when the song shifts on us, right? When it takes a turn for the unexpected, right? It sounds totally normal, right? There is an inn, a merry old inn beneath an old gray hill. Okay, right? Particularly appropriate, right? As he's actually singing within an inn underneath a hill, right? And there they brew a beer so brown. Okay, as you know, they brew good beer in this inn. Again, sounds like a completely, fun but totally normal thing, right? And then there's a sudden turn. Hang on a second. Caution. Don't be thinking about Tilion and Arian yet. Anyway, I'm cautioning about that. I mean, it's like a little bit relevant, of course, but I just be cautious about it. This is a very imperfectly naturalized song within the mythology of the Silmarillion. We are getting, Marianne, as you say, a folktale or fantastic story. But again, see, the thing I want to emphasize is it doesn't start off strange, right? We're given a very normal setting until the man in the moon comes down himself, right? Okay, so the man in the moon himself has come down one night to drink his fill. Now we know this is fantastical in some way, right? This is now a marvelous story. It wasn't a marvelous story from the very beginning, right? But the man in the moon comes down and it becomes marvelous. And what do we immediately see? The ostler has a tipsy cat that plays a 5-stringed fiddle. And up and down he runs his bow, now squeaking high, now purring low, now sawing in the middle. The landlord keeps a little dog that is mighty fond of jokes. When there's good cheer among the guests, he cocks an ear at all the jests and laughs until he chokes. Okay. So the ostler's cat plays the fiddle, and the landlord's dog laughs at the jokes of his guests, right? Okay, so having gotten fantastical with the man in the moon, we're staying fantastical, right? We find this is not a normal inn at all. This whole thing is operating in as several of you are suggesting, in a fairy world, right? This is a world with like different rules that we have. Okay, so we see that, but what is the spirit of that world? Do you see what I mean by that? It's different. It's weird. It's marvelous, right? But what's the flavor of marvelous, right? The ostler's cat being able to play the fiddle and the landlord's dog cocking an ear at all the jests when there's good cheer among the guests and laughing until he chokes is not, neither one of those marvels is random, right? This is not the effects of the infinite improbability drive, right? This is this fits the theme, right? Jollity, Aerocab, absolutely. And JJ, yeah, inns are fun places. This is marvelous. It's humorous and it's marvelous, but it's marvelous within a theme, right? And the theme is, this is like the inn of fairy. This is like the Uber pub, right? At this pub, like this pub is such a lovely pub, right? This is such a wonderful place that even the ostler's cat takes part in the entertainment, right? And there's so much laughter and so much fun among the guests that even the landlord's dog participates directly in the jollity, right? The humor, the amusement of the guests is so great that it's perceptible even to the dog, right? So this seems to be, it's the inn of lost play. Yeah, something like that. And yes, Alex, starting in that first stanza, right? They brew their own beer. Most inns brew their own beer, apparently, right? Butterbur brews his own beer. And we can tell that the inns brew their own beer in the Shire, too, as you can tell, for instance, by the particularly high reputation of the inn at the Golden Perch, right? In stock. But anyway, so what we're seeing is like all of these things that good inns are known for, right? And we're seeing all of these things being exaggerated. How jolly is the company at this inn? So jolly that even the dog joins in, right? What's the quality of entertainment at this inn? So high that even the ostler's cat plays the fiddle, right? And how good is the beer? So good that the man in the moon himself descends from the heavens in order to partake of the beer himself, right? So yeah, so we can see the theme, right? It's marvelous, but it's marvelous within the tavern genre, right? And that's interesting. That's our first context. Okay, so let's keep going. They also keep a horned cow as proud as any queen. But music turns her head like ale, and makes her wave her tufted tail and dance upon the green. And oh, the rows of silver dishes and the store of silver spoons. For Sunday there's a special pair, and these they polish up with care on Saturday afternoons. The man in the moon was drinking deep, and the cat began to wail. A dish and a spoon on the table danced, the cow in the garden madly pranced, and the little dog chased his tail. Okay. The cow is particularly proud. JJ, I also have never noted cows to be remarkable for their pride. But I guess, I have known only a few cows relatively well, so it's possible that the ones I knew were particularly humble. It's possible. I'm not really sure. Oh yes, I absolutely do, for Thoughtless, assume that the cat is wailing on the fiddle and not wailing in the regular cat wailing way. I think it's a play on the regular cat wailing, right? Now, like, hearing a cat wail is usually not a good thing. But in this case, in this inn, right, when the cat's wailing, he's really getting down on the fiddle, right? But anyway, okay, so the cow is proud, but she gets drunk on music, right? And she dances upon the green. And again, how enchanting is the good cheer at this inn, right? It has this effect even on the local livestock, right? The proud local cow is enchanted, right? And dances upon the green. And oh, the rows of, I love the oh in that stanza, right? Just exclaiming, oh man, I didn't even talk about their crockery, right? Can you even guess at an inn like this, right? At like the Uber Inn, man, imagine the rows of silver dishes and the store of silver spoons, right? And even among those, even among the silver dishes that they have, because they don't just have crockery like Butterbur has, they have silver stuff, right? And in their silver, there's even a special pair that's like even more special than the rest of the silver stuff, right? And now, having established this marvelous super inn, we get to the action of the day in question, because what we're going to be hearing about, right? This has all just been setting the scene, right? And the scene is being set for this one particular night where things got really crazy. So what we're getting is the most extraordinary night in the most extraordinary inn in the world, right? We're getting sort of marvels heaped upon marvels here. The man in the moon was drinking deep, and the cat began to wail. A dish and a spoon on the table danced. The cow in the garden madly pranced, and the little dog chased his tail. The little dog, who enjoys the good cheer among the guests, is like going crazy, spinning in circles because he's so happy. And there's the cat wailing away on his fiddle, and the dish and the spoon are dancing. It's not just the cow, right? The jollity of the room and the music and the excellence of the music is not only affecting the livestock, it's even affecting the flatware. So there we go. That's just how exceptional this one night was, right? And yes, Mungley says because he's a dog, right? Absolutely. Notice how he's playing on both normal cat behavior and normal dog behavior, right? But having established their roles, the cat and the dog's roles in this marvelous context at the Super Inn, right? He takes these activities which by themselves would just sound like normal cat and dog activities, right? The cat's wailing and the dog's running in circles, right? Like cats do, like dogs do. But yet within the marvelous context, we see far from coming down to normal behavior, it's taking it up another notch to super marvelous behavior, right? The man in the moon took another mug and then rolled beneath his chair, and there he dozed and dreamed of ale till in the sky the stars were pale and dawn was in the air. So we had the music, the jollity, the festiveness of the evening, so extraordinary, and apparently the potency of the beer also is at its peak levels here this evening as the man in the moon passes out beneath his chair. So this is the story of that one extraordinary evening in which we get the man in the moon rolling beneath his chair till dawn is about to happen, and here's the moon still at the pub. Then the ostler said to his tipsy cat, "The white horses of the moon, they neigh and champ their silver bits, but their master's been and drowned his wits, and the sun'll be rising soon." Steve, you did an awesome job with this stanza. I think this is the hardest stanza in the song to sing. The second line, or second half of that line, right, that trimeter line, is really tricky, right? This is, I think, the most remarkable rhythmic variation of any line in the poem. Then the ostler said to his tipsy cat, "The white horses of the moon." The white horses of the moon. It doesn't even sound iambic, that line, right? It's not just we're adding a little triplet, right? There is an inn, a merry old inn, right? That's not just let's put a merry old inn instead of just a regular iambic pattern. Yeah, Steve, it really is a mouthful. Right? Again, I was listening for that stanza, and I was really impressed with how you pulled that off, because it's very difficult. Then the ostler said to his tipsy cat, "The white horses of the moon, they neigh and champ their silver bits, but their master's been and drowned his wits, and the sun will be rising soon." It gets back to regular. By the way, I didn't mention that there are very few rhythmic variations within lines 3 and 4. Lines 3 and 4 are almost always very regular iambs. He squeaked and sawed and quickened the tune while the landlord shook the man in the moon. We do get the quicken the tune to get a little triplet feel there in the end. Anyway, the ostlers, I think that it would be my argument that the awkwardness of that first line is deliberate. It's supposed to be a little bit jarring, right? The ostler is kind of being the buzzkill here, right? Everybody is having the best night ever at the best inn ever, right? So we have marvelous within the marvelous, and then here's the ostler kind of bringing people back to reality, and he's like, people, we have to reestablish normality, right? The moon has got to set because the sun's coming up. So, you know, the white horses of the moon are neighing and champing at their silver bits, right? He's the one who is trying to bring things back into the normal pattern, right? So the cat on his fiddle played hey diddle diddle, a jig that would wake the dead. He squeaked and sawed and quickened the tune while the landlord shook the man in the moon. It's after 3, he said. The cat on his fiddle played hey diddle diddle. That's a very remarkable line. What do you notice about that line? That's pretty special. We've not heard anything like this, especially not in line 1, right? Yeah, exactly, JJ and Alex. The internal rhyme, right? The thing that has made line 1 stand out all the way through the song to this point is it doesn't rhyme with anything, right? It's the springboard to line 2, right? Which is going to rhyme ultimately with line 5. But we get internal rhyme here. So the cat on his fiddle played hey diddle diddle. And yes, Erocab, we sort of break into anapests. This triplet feel that's been running through, right? There is an in a merry old inn, ba 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 ba. You know, that's very sorry, I'm messing with my phone here. That's a very prominent pattern throughout the poem, but we finally get the sorry, Twitter people complaining about me trying to mess with my phone while I'm broadcasting. Anyway, sorry. It doesn't exactly fall into regular anapests here, but that triplet feel that's been kind of lurking all the way through the poem comes out very strongly in this stanza, right? This is the big one. So the cat and the fiddle played hey diddle diddle, a jig that would wake the dead. When we return to iambs in the second line, a jig that would wake the dead. Wake the dead is back to the normal iambic pattern. And boy, doesn't that sound remarkable, right? Don't you land on wake the dead really heavily, because we're in anapests all the way through. So the cat and the fiddle played hey diddle diddle, a jig that would wake the dead. I love how that how that ends up coming through. But notice how, you know, we get the increased frenzied pace of things, right? Because having established the marvelous inn and then having added on top of that this specially marvelous night when everything was really already pretty amped up and pretty extra marvelous, now we're gonna respond by cranking it up one more level, right? We're gonna go even higher, and the poem's rhythm responds to that and gets really frantic while the cat is playing hey diddle diddle. And of course, we get one of the jokes here, right? Which is hey diddle diddle is of course the first line of the original nursery rhyme, right? So it's and so at this point, remember the whole conceit behind the original poem, right? A nursery rhyme undone and its scandalous secret unlocked, right? The whole point is it's going to tell us the story behind the nursery rhyme itself. Sounds like a nonsense rhyme, right? Hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle, the cow jumped over the moon. Like, what do any of those things have to do with each other, right? The cat and the fiddle, are they connected with each other, right? Doesn't even, that line by itself doesn't even necessarily convey that the cat's playing the fiddle. It's just a cat. We have cat, we have fiddle, right? We have the cow jumping over the moon. Why? How? In what context? We have no idea, right? The little dog laughed to see such sport. Okay, right? But we don't get. There's no story there, right? The actual use of the words of the phrase "hey diddle diddle" here, right, is our clear signal. Now it comes, right? Having given you the background, now we get the action of the nursery rhyme. And that's pretty cool. Alex, you're right. Alex points out, as fantastical as the animals are, the humans in this poem are all relatively dedicated to doing their jobs. It's true. Yeah, they're all very responsible, which is, of course, especially fun, I suppose, when your job is like helping to create the most super awesome inn in the world. Anyway, so let's keep going. where I was like, oh yeah, he squeaked and sawed and quickened the tune while the landlord shook the man in the moon. It's after 3, he said. Those lines, as I said, normally lines 3 and 4 are very regular iambic tetrameter. The shifts in this particular stanza are so cool, though. He squeaked and sawed and quickened the tune. Doesn't that sound like a fiddle, right? He squeaked and sawed and quickened the tune while the landlord shook the man in the moon. It's after 3, he said. Yeah. I love the way that Tolkien's rhythm in that stanza really evokes the sound. That can't you hear the fiddle when you hear those lines? It's pretty cool. They rolled the man slowly up the hill and bundled him into the moon, while his horses galloped up in rear, and the cow came capering like a deer, and a dish ran up with the spoon. So, the man in the moon is not the moon, right? He's the man in the moon. And we meet the man in the moon in other contexts. 2 other contexts within Tolkien's world. See, yeah, Tilion, yes, technically. No, not really. Roverandom. Yes, Rick. Roverandom. That's the man in the moon we're talking about here, clearly. There's a companion piece. So he wrote 2 man in the moon poems in this period. One is this one, which was also went by the title of The Man in the Moon Stayed Up Too Late. There's the other poem, the companion piece to this is The Man in the Moon Came Down Too Soon, which is about how the man in the moon is looking down from the moon, and he's kind of looking enviously, like things are all kind of pale and washed out on the moon, and he's like, I want vibrant colors, I want life, I want to eat steak and drink wine and exciting bright colors, and I want to live a little, experience the life of the world, so I'm going to go down into the world and I'm going to live it up some. But then he's going down the stairs and he trips and falls into the ocean, and they fish him out, and it's early in the morning and he doesn't get anything, and he ends up like off in the corner of an inn kitchen eating bad porridge. Aragorn, it does not go well for the man in the moon. In The Man in the Moon Comes Down Too Soon. It's kind of a sad poem, really. He just never gets what he wants. But the point is, he's a comical figure. I mean, the whole poem is kind of a joke at his expense. Now, the man in the moon is less comical in Roverandom. He's a magician. He's a wizard. But it's the same genre, though, as the 2 Man in the Moon poems that Tolkien had wrote at around, in that same era of his life. So is the Man in the Moon Tilion? Yeah, theoretically, like, kind of. By dint of the fact that the poem has been included in the Lord of the Rings, which is definitely being connected with the Silmarillion tradition, logically, and fortunately within that mythology, there is a man in the moon, right? Tilion. Cool. So we can therefore have hobbits singing songs about the man in the moon without inconsistency, right? It works within the mythology, and it's easy to say that the hobbits, the mere fact that they understand that there's a man in the moon shows that they have some kind of cultural inheritance of the legends of Tilion and Aryan, but they don't have any clear stories about it, and so they tell these sort of mythologically degenerate stories of the man in the moon, which have their origin in the reality of Tilion in the moon. But it's so like, yeah, you can construct that, right? It works, it's fine, it's totally fine. But if you're picturing Tilion when you're reading the Man in the Moon poem, I don't think that's quite right, if you see what I mean. Do you see what I mean by the difference between that? It works. It can be made to work. You can write an explanation of why Bilbo and Frodo would be singing this kind of a song about the man in the moon, right? Even though there's no reason to think Tilion behaves like this, right? So you can, again, you can explain it. You can make it work, but to think that whichever level we're thinking of it on, whether we're thinking of it as like historically within Tolkien's own writings, or whether we're thinking of it in terms of even the song as Frodo and Bilbo wrote it, I don't think that even within the frame of the story, Frodo and Bilbo are really thinking about Tilion when they're... And for those of you who don't know the Silmarillion, I shouldn't assume, there is a Maya who's driving the chariot of the moon, and it's a male Maya, and his name is Tilion. So there is literally a spirit who is like the chariot driver of the moon, and his name is Tilion and everything. Yeah, I hear that, Tom. And I know somebody else was mentioning this, I think, earlier on. After, ages of unrequited love, Tilion may well have taken to drink. I get it. That, I'm not saying that doesn't make sense. I'm just saying, I think if we treat this, if we try to take this song really seriously as like, and this is one of the legends of, didn't you wonder what Tilion was doing after? Well, here it is, right? This is one of those true myths of Tilion, Maya of the Moon. That's not how, to read it this way is that way. That is, would be, I think, a pretty serious misreading of the poem. Yeah. And Matt, you're absolutely right. He's not driving a chariot or something, right? He's riding in a carriage, which because you can't be bundled into a chariot. No one was ever bundled into a chariot, right? Or at least it'd be very hard to do so. But yeah, you can get bundled into a carriage. In fact, this is exactly like the drunken people being bundled into chariots, the upper class hobbits at the long expected party, right? Getting bundled, chariots coming for the important folk, right? And yet, JJ, you're right. He does not get carted away in a lunar wheelbarrow. So he is, but that just shows that he's, upper class, right? Presumably, if this were one of the lesser celestial spirits, somebody would come with a celestial wheelbarrow and haul him away. Anyway, so they're rolling the man up the hill because that's where he parked the moon. Makes sense, right? The inn is underneath a hill, so when the man in the moon descends to drink his fill at the inn, he lands like Santa Claus, right, like Father Christmas, on the top of the hill, and then comes down because he's in his his flying thing, anyway, yeah. So that's why they're having to roll him up the hill. They're rolling him because, I don't know, what is he fat? I think he must be fat. You think the man in the moon is fat? I think the man in the moon is fat. And that's why they're rolling him up the hill and bundling him into the moon. Yeah, Alex, I mean, I certainly agree. There's no, based on the evidence of the song, there's every reason to think that the man in the moon is probably not, toned and cut, right, based on his life choices here. Anyway, for Laurie, fair enough. For Laurie thinks it would depend on the time of month as to how fat the man in the moon is. Maybe it does. Maybe he gets skinny every month and then gets fat again. I can totally believe that. And yeah, Mike, it may well be that the man in the moon is too big to carry. Are these hobbits who are running this? Is this an entire hobbit cast? Is the landlord, the ostler, are all of them hobbits? Every reason to think so. I would think it's a hobbit song, isn't it? So yeah, I would think they would be hobbits, which, Mike, I agree, would be another reason why they wouldn't be able to pick up and carry the man in the moon, even if he's not fat, which I think he probably is fat. He is He's too big, right? Okay, so his horses are galloping up in rear. Here's his horses taking it really seriously, but they're being accompanied. But here's the horses are doing their job, right? So we have the humans and the horses, or the hobbits and the horses, doing their jobs faithfully, while the other characters are having a good time. So we have the horses, but then the cow is sort of the counterpoint to the horses, right? If the oops, I just lost it again. By the way, since I keep defaulting to the logout screen because I keep getting lost in the song, brief observation of how awesome the new login screen is, right? Love the Minas Tirith background of the human login screen now, by the way. Today's update. Looking nice. Anyway, okay, so let's keep going. Now, and when the dish is running up with the spoon. So remember that that exceptional evening, right? The things being super marvelous on top of super marvelous, and then things getting turned up even higher when the cat, we're reminded that's still happening, right? The dish and the spoon are running around, right? The cow is capering like a deer. I have known enough cows to know that a cow capering like a deer, pretty unlikely. Now, quicker the fiddle went deedle-dum-deedle, the dog began to roar. I love the rhythm there. You hear that? I can't do that rhythm any other way. Now, quicker the fiddle went deedle-dum-diddle. Once again, we have that frantic fiddle motion, right? Now, quicker the fiddle went deedle-dum-deedle, the dog began to roar. The dog began to roar. That's normal iambic trimeter, right? Normal iambic pattern. But doesn't it sound plodding after that first line? Now, quicker the fiddle went deedle-dum-deedle, the dog began to roar. This sort of stompy line there of iambs. The cow and the horses stood on their heads. The guests all bounded from their beds and danced upon the floor. Spontaneous dancing breaking out. There were some guests apparently who were not part of the festivities. They were actually sleeping because it's after 3 o'clock, presumably 3 o'clock a.m. And so lots of people were actually sleeping in their rooms upstairs. The level of jollity in the inn has gotten so high that people are spontaneously leaping from their beds and dancing immediately, right? They're not just being woken up, and they're not complaining about it. They're just, it is everything transformed to wild fun here, right? The cow and the horses stood on their heads. So the cow is like now affected the horses, right? Even the horses are standing on their heads, not just the cow, but the horses also. Erokeb, it's in time with the rolling of the moon, right? That is with the party gets really rocking when we're rolling the moon up the hill, right? It's not, the party's not over. It's only still escalating. With a ping and a pong, the fiddle strings broke, the cow jumped over the moon, and the little dog laughed to see such fun, and the Saturday dish went off at a run with the silver Sunday spoon. Here we get the stanza which contains the majority of the original nursery rhyme, right? But notice how replacing the hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle, the cow jumped over the moon, right? With a ping and a pong, the fiddle strings broke. This is the end of the story, right? This is not the beginning of the story. And again, that's sort of the whole joke, right? Tony asks, is it possible the moon is affecting everyone with lunacy? Maybe. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, my resistance to that is lunacy, in traditional stories, was very different from this. But that's okay. Right? I mean, it's fine that it should be different. But yeah, and Cecile, you're absolutely right. The ping and a pong does the wonderful onomatopoeia for the sound of a fiddle string breaking, right? It is exactly what it sounds like. Yeah. At Lincoln, yes, the Saturday dish running off with the Sunday spoon does sound like some kind of cross-racial elopement, right? It's like the Baron and Luthien of the flatware. Right? Absolutely. And you're right, Mike, it's cross-class as well, right? Because it's not a Sunday spoon and a Sunday dish running off together. It's a Saturday dish running off with the Sunday spoon, right? So yeah, very much breaking the class boundary for Dauntless. This is the Saturday dish is marrying up like you do in Tolkien, right? Especially if you're a guy. This silver Sunday spoon is clearly the female figure, right? Because the dish is marrying up. It is a scandalous elopement, Tony, but it's not just it is the consummation, right? In this case, it's the marital consummation of the festival that's happening here, right? The tamest line in the entire stanza here is the little dog laughed to see such fun. It's clearly only there because that line's there in the original nursery rhyme, right? To see such fun or to see such sport. I've heard the nursery rhyme in with both of those, with either of those lines, either of those versions. He uses fun so that he can rhyme it with run. Yeah. Anyway, that line is pretty tame, right? But that's because it's from the original nursery rhyme. So note how instead of just sort of taking the wild and crazy concepts that are just kind of thrown together in the original nursery rhyme, which is really just kind of a piece of nonsense poetry. Not nonsense poetry in the Vogon poetry sense where it's using nonsense words, but nonsense poetry in the sense of it just kind of being random images and things that are fun but not explained, right? And so giving the explanation makes it even more fun. But of course the explanation is that this is the way that we build to this crescendo and the sort of entertaining elopement of the Saturday. That is, I say it's entertaining. I'm assuming that the elopement between the Saturday dish and the Sunday spoon is consensual, right? Because I just want to think that. We're not told that explicitly. We're told that the dish ran off with the silver Sunday spoon. I'm hoping that the Saturday dish didn't do a more sinister, Lobelia Sackville Baggins on the Sunday spoon there. Because we do have some precedent of spoons just being walked off with, right? Yeah. I'm totally assuming that it's a consensual elopement between the Saturday dish and the Sunday spoon. And my primary reason for thinking that is that they were dancing previously, right? So I'm sure totally consensual. Absolutely. The round moon rolled behind the hill as the sun raised up her head. Now, this does not prove that the man in the moon was fat. It's the moon that's round. That is, it's the carriage of the moon. He's in a round carriage, because the carriage is itself the moon. It rolls behind the hill as the sun raised up her head. She hardly believed her fiery eyes, for though it was day, to her surprise they all went back to bed. For Dauntless says, Tolkien's continuing to get the phases of the moon correct, even when the moon is drunk. Yes, exactly. So the and I love how all the moon has to do is set, right? The problem is not that the moon doesn't have to get back up in the sky. It just has to go down. It's been on the hilltop. So it's not that the moon has left its course. It's just tarrying, right? It's descended, and it's resting on the hilltop, and it stays there. When the moon gets to the hilltop above the inn, the man in the moon just puts it in park, right? Gets out and goes to drink his fill of the brown beer at the Super Inn. Unfortunately, he doesn't have long to go. Once they bundle him into the moon and get the horses set up right, all they have to do is just wheel it on down the hill so it sets. Yeah. We do have the feminine pronoun used with the sun. And Tony, you had wanted to talk about the capitalization of the sun and moon. This is clearly a gesture. I think clearly a gesture of incorporating it within the Silmarillion mythology, especially the use of she as applied to the sun, which is very unusual, not utterly unheard of, but very unusual mythologically speaking, right? But of course, fitting the Silmarillion mythology that we saw, in the Silmarillion, it's a female spirit who is the power behind the sun, who's driving the sun. And yeah, the fiery eyes, that's the only part. The fiery eyes of the sun is, in my opinion, literally the only part of this, which sounds like a naturalized line from the Silmarillion mythology, right? So, that's, we do get that, right? Okay. So how do we end our song, right? Having escalated and escalated until we reach the point where we're doing the nursery rhyme, right? And the nursery rhyme is at the apex of the marvelous and crazy that's going on here, but at the super inn, right? At the climax of the most marvelous night of, where the good cheer at the inn was so great that people are bounding from their beds and dancing on the floor. Then we get the nursery rhyme, and then everyone's going back to bed, right? We have the moon sets, the sun rises, normality is restored, right? We kind of return out of this sort of little alternate fairy universe that we've been in, though not entirely. Presumably the cat is still capable of playing the fiddle and the dog still laughs at jokes, right? Anyway, yeah, I know you guys are talking about sun and moon mythologies. Yeah, I mean, it's very common for the sun to be male. Yes, Greek, Roman, Egyptian have masculine sun figures. I'm not saying it's unique. I'm just saying it's unusual and definitely fitting with the Silmarillion mythology. Cool. Anyway. And again, the reason I bring that up here at the end is that I do think at the very end of this poem, this final stanza, seems to me a much stronger gesture towards naturalizing, as I say, making this song into a naturalized citizen of Middle Earth in the Lord of the Rings world, right? Than it really has been throughout most of the poem leading up to this point. Is the final stanza part of the original? Well, I was actually just going to look that up. Let's look this up. So I'm getting out my copy of The Return of the Shadow here. Let's see, where are we? Does somebody find it for me? I don't want to waste time searching. I could probably find it in the appendix. Is it under Cat and the Fiddle? Do we get that? Yes, we do. Okay. I think I got it here. Yep. All right. There's the troll song. Here's the Cat and the Fiddle song. Yep. Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought. I was pretty sure I remembered that. I wanted to double check to make sure. Yes. Listen to the stanza, the final stanza in the original version. This is the version that was published back in the 1920s. The round moon rolled off down the hill, but only just in time. For the sun looked up with fiery head and ordered everyone back to bed, and the ending of the rhyme, right? So the sun comes in like a parent, sticking his or her head into the nursery and telling everybody not to knock it off and go to sleep, right? The sun looked up with fiery head. There's no indication of gender there at all, right? That fire is associated with the sun, not weird at all, right? But But yes, aggressively ungendered Mike, absolutely, and ordered everyone back to bed in the ending of the rhyme. So the specific femininity, right? She hardly believed her. We get 3 feminine pronouns for the sun in 2 lines, right? 4 in 3 lines, right? So Mike, he's chosen aggressively to gender the sun, right? In this, not in gender, but gender the sun in this final stanza. And so, yeah, this shift when he incorporates it into the Lord of the Rings and he decides to strongly emphasize the fact that the sun is feminine, right? Again, that to me speaks of a real intention to integrate the song into the Silmarillion mythology. But again, to me, it's not like it's the only one or the first one, but it's, I think the most emphatic one, right? Okay. So that's pretty much what we have time for tonight. I'm sure it doesn't surprise anyone that we spent the whole class talking about the poem. I think, yeah, and this is a long song too, right? And thank you for indulging me, because I've never really done that before. I've never really gone stanza by stanza. I've talked about this before. We talked about this in my Tolkien's poetry class at Signum and stuff. But I've never really taken the time to do like an entire class session going stanza by stanza through this poem before. So that was fun. Tune in next week when we will get back to the responses, right? And of course, the disastrous after effects or effects of the second singing of the song. Yeah, Matt, fair enough. Matt says, if anything, it's surprising we made it all the way through the song. True enough. Well, we'll get to, so Terlonia will get to Frodo's embarrassing of himself next time. I don't know if maybe we could actually finish the chapter next time. That seems a little bit rash, but it's conceivable. I think it's conceivable that we could actually get to the end of the chapter next time, but I'd have to hustle. We'll see. Anyway, so I'm gonna stop our book discussion there. Time to shift and do our field trip now. I will be here next week, but don't forget daylight savings. So if you live in a different country or in Arizona or Hawaii, then you'll then it'll be at a different time. So don't forget that. Anyway, so thanks everybody for joining me. I'm going to say goodbye to the Twitter folks, and we're going to shift over to Twitch full time here, twitch.tv/SignumU, and we'll do our in-game field trip here as well. Thanks everybody. Okay. All right.
Good evening, everybody. This is Filori.
All right. Thanks, Filori, for joining me again. We are ready. Sorry, I'm like stacking my sort of now tenuous stack of books over there. Okay. All right. Oh, wait, hang on a second. We're not going to fellow up, I think. We're just going to kind of hang together. Oh, I see. Level 7. Yeah, that'll be fun. But no, you should be able to hang with us. Yeah, so just we're just going to hang together in a group. We're going to be okay, we're not going to be in totally safe circumstances the whole time, but
You signed the waiver, right?
We're still going to be in Bree, so it shouldn't get too ugly. All right. So we have been touring the other villages around Bree. And I want to head to Archit and the Chetwood. We've looked at Staddle and Coombe, and I want to get to Archit and the Chetwood, as I say.
Sounds good.
And then we'll circle back around. So I'm tempted, of course, to go to the to the Midgewater Marshes, but I'm trying to save the Midgewater Marshes for when we get there in the book.
Yeah.
That'll be a long time from now, though.
Yeah.
Even if we do finish chapter 9 next week, we still have, still have the Strider chapter. We still have a long conversation back in the parlor to happen before we get to any of that. Okay, so I'm just gonna run, I think.
Oh,
Actually,
okay.
I guess I can mount up. All right. So let's see.
Do we have anyone who doesn't have a steed? Let me see if that...
I want to go through Coom. Probably best actually to go this way, right? Instead of going out.
Yeah. Yep.
The gate the normal way.
That's right.
Okay.
I think that level 7 is not... Does she have a horse? I don't know. Just checking.
Oh, yeah. Possibly not. I love the high bridge.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to jump off the high bridge. That's faster, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
And half the time you don't break your leg.
Hey, I didn't. Look at that.
Yeah. I think they changed. I don't know if there's a change in the ground or something like that. Maybe it's like Elrond's table.
Right, exactly.
The developers were just sick of hearing the crack of ankles.
And the sort of desks in the lore hall work the same way. If I time it right, I can always jump off from the balcony and land on a table and not break my leg.
See, the sound has just completely, deterred me from trying in most cases.
I hear that, yeah. And for those of you who are not players, when you jump off and land, you there's a really
distressing sound,
inducing crunching sound.
I want to shake the Foley artist's hand on that one. It's just
it was very well chosen, yes, but it is hard to take after a while, and you get a whole group of people jumping off and landing down a cliff. It's
I can't wait till my burglar gets that safe fall one.
Yeah. All right, so here we are in the middle of Coom. I'm going to hang out here for a second while we wait for people to catch up with us. Here's the Comb and Waddle Inn. As we saw before we got through here in Coom last time. Let's see. We're gonna head up to Archet, so that means I'm gonna head over this way. Right. I want to make sure I'm pointing in the correct one. Okay. All right. We'll go over there to the Chetwood fairly soon. But okay, we have everybody. I think we have everybody. All right. Let's head up to Archet. Now, of course, Archet gets burned down in the intro sequence. And the intro sequence, it's unclear to me. It was always unclear to me. I was a little distressed by the burning down of Archet the first time I played that. Not only because, it's sort of sad to see a place that whose name you're familiar with, from the book, burned down. But I was troubled by the chronology. And this was, now I'm forgetting. It's only when you're playing a Hobbit, isn't it, that you see Frodo and Sam and Pippin going by at the beginning?
Yes, that's right.
All right, it's only when you're playing a Hobbit. So I didn't get that because I started with Wiggend. The man in the intro to the... You just don't get that sequence at all in the human version, do you?
Yeah, no. You wake up in the jail.
Yeah. 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 Anyway, so I wasn't even aware of the chronology at first, but after seeing that, I became a little, I was told about it and I went and saw it and I was a little bit distressed, or at least uncertain, because if you're there seeing Frodo and Sam and Pippin walk by, and it's in the Shire that you're seeing them walk by, right? So they are on the. Here we go to the map, not the cute Archit map, nor the Breland map, but the Shire map, right? It's right here in the Green Hill Country. You know, they're in Chapter 3.
Yeah, near Odo's Leaf Farm, I believe it was.
Exactly. So this is the 3 of them crossing the Shire. This is 3 as company. And then in what within game chronology feels like immediately afterwards, you're in Archit, and then after running around for a little while, there's a battle in Archit, and Archit ends up getting burnt down. And it sort of seems like that's before they're there in Bree. But when you finally get to Bree, Strider's there, and the hobbits are also there, right?
No, the hobbits aren't.
They're not there
you're only there with Celadine, Brandybuck, and the other Sackville.
Yeah, in the intro sequence, yeah. But I'm thinking when you get to Bree, when you get to the Prancing Pony.
Yeah, no, they're not there. They've already left.
Right, they've already left. So by the time you get to Bree, they've left already. So we're in. No, wait, but Strider's still there at the beginning.
Yes.
Yeah, they're in a different room.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
That's right. We start off with Strider, and then when we come back, Strider is gone. We're supposed to assume that he's met up with the hobbits and they've taken off.
Right, exactly. So, and and I'm forgetting the dialogue in those. It's been a while since I've done, book 1 of the Epic Quest. Yeah. But in that initial sequence there, does Strider mention that he is still waiting for them? So when you're questing with him and going back and reporting to Strider and trying to figure out the whole Umdir the Ranger thing, that's while he's still waiting for the hobbits to show up.
Yes.
And then
you go off and then you go off and do your thing, and you're supposed to believe that probably an evening has passed. The hobbits have come and gone with Strider the next morning. Right, and you just missed it. You missed Frodo's performance in the Prancing Pony. By the way, I've always been disappointed that there's no session play for Frodo's song in the inn. Yeah.
I don't know.
The ring is on. Quick, get to a hiding place.
Yeah.
Now take it off. Who's this mysterious fellow in the corner?
Yeah, I would love to see them do a Frodo meeting Strider and, having his mishap with the ring session play. Let's see, if we did that, who would you session play as? Mugwort. You would session play as Mugwort the Hobbit. That's how I do it. That's how I do it, yeah.
Maybe it's Parliament and you have to fight off the ranger who's trying to get at your poor guests.
But Sam, the problem with session playing as Butterbur is that he's not there when Frodo
you're right. He only hears about it after the fact.
Yeah.
I think you'd have to be Frodo, and you have to get out from safety and then make sure you're not seen, and then come out when you're supposed to.
It's true if you actually want to have any, actions that the person has to perform, rather than just one of those session plays where you're observing something happening, which are really fun. Exactly. I mean, I love those. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, you to actually Tony suggests Sam to session play as Sam, the only Hobbit who's actually keeping a low profile in the common room that evening. I
think Sam has more horse sense than we give him credit for.
Yeah. I think so. Druid's Fire's suggesting doing the session play as Bill Fernie. That would be interesting. Or the squint-eyed Southerner.
The squint-eyed Southerner, I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway,
that's sort of a monster play.
Exactly. Yeah, so I'm getting distracted here. My main chronology. So I guess that we're supposed to understand that the whole time that you're there in Archit questing around, a lot of time passes, right?
Yes.
But it's still before they get to Bree. So
yeah, but then they send you back to Mickle Delving, and you're supposed to do the whole epic line in the Shire.
In the Shire, right? If you play as a
Yeah.
hobbit, yeah. So, I think that they are trying to construct the chronology within the game. By the time Frodo and by the time the events of Chapter 9 occur, by the time Frodo and the hobbits arrive at Bree and are in the common room with the Prancing Pony, Archet has recently burned down, according to the game chronology, and that's tough. I think I have a hard time with that. Like, how could that not come up?
By the way, one of the towns just burnt down to the ground.
Exactly. I mean, you'd think that that such an event would be so monumental that nobody in the common room at the Prancing Pony would be talking about anything else, right? JJ says, well, the arrival of visitors drove it out of their minds. Yeah, exactly. That's the thing that's kind of hard to take, actually.
Well, there's no accounting for East and West.
Yeah, apparently. This is sort of making it. There's no accounting for the middle, really. So, I mean, one thing that I guess I would say is, I don't know. I mean, obviously, this whole sequence, right? This whole opening sequence is like literally the oldest part of the game. And I think that you can see some evidence of them not really kind of getting their stride yet in working out how the story is going to, like, how the story that they're telling is going to be related to the primary story. We see flashes of it, like the meeting of Frodo and Sam and Pippin on the road, right? Does show
or the fact that the fact that these hooded figures are looking for hobbits, even if they mistakenly got us. Right,
exactly. And I like the conceit of them having caught a Sackville Baggins and are mistaking him for like the Baggins that they're looking for and seeking to interrogate him and stuff. The fact that they have captured and are imprisoning and plan potentially, most likely to torture these other random hobbits also seems to me perfectly plausible, like just exactly the way that I would expect Black Riders to be acting in the Shire. But anyway, it's there. So we can see a lot of really interesting sort of extrapolation there. But the main thing that I mean, later on in the story, we see them much in the game story, that is in the epic story, we see them much more successfully kind of paralleling the action to the story of the book. And it seems almost like at the beginning with the burning down of Archet, like it seems almost more like a kind of alternate universe world than it does sort of showing us what's happening around the outside of the published story, which is what we end up getting for most of the rest of the epic story and a lot of that. So I don't know. I mean, this is me sort of speculating, but the reason I point that out is that something like that, the burning down of Archet, I'm trying to think of other examples of that kind of thing, because it's not going to change.
Drastic.
Right. Something that drastic. Now, again, it's not drastic in the sense of, I mean, it's not like the story goes to Archet and they've totally changed the Archet story. I mean, we never visit Archet in the story. It could be burned down for all we know, right? But again, like it doesn't really very plausibly fit within the story as we get it. And
as opposed to the towns that get burned down later in the game, which actually do fit in a lot better.
Exactly.
Like and again, Dunlin and Rohan.
That commitment to having the epic quest line either follow the story in parallel or flesh out details of the story that, I mean, even by the time we get to book 4, were involved in doing things like spending a whole long quest line fulfilling the promise of one sentence in the Fellowship of the Ring, right? We're told that scouts are sent out, searching for the Black Riders and, accounting for all their horses and things like that. In one sentence, we're told that that's a thing that happens, right? And so, and even I loved and I loved this so much, and I still love this. This is really the moment when I totally fell in love with the epic story in Lotro, is when they, because we're told, of course, in the Fellowship of the Ring that only 8 horses were found, right? But we're not, it was just, immediately 8 horses were found, and that's all we're told, right? But then the fact that we get this whole but where was the 9th horse, right? What happened to the 9th horse? There's got to be a story there, right? And Elrond's all concerned about the 9th horse and what happens. I love that, and that kind of storyline, right? That whole category of adaptation, to take a little detail from the story and say, what was the story about? We're not told that story, but what was the story behind that? And to use that as the mechanism of expanding into the, the story for gameplay. Yeah. I think that's really, really cool. I think that's really, really fun.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one totally.
And we don't, and even things like the Lone Lands, which we'll get, into a little bit later on in our tours. But even the sort of very different stories that are going on up in Gartha Garwin and stuff like that, which, as I say, we'll see soon.
Or just taking reference of Forkel and building a whole world around that.
Yeah, exactly. Those are more pure, these are possible interesting stories that are happening off the the radar, so we can add them, we can fill in stuff.
And they can be Bernie and not distract us from the main story.
Exactly. Things can be set fire to, and we'll be okay with it. Anyway, so, this as a piece of adaptation, I find the Burning of Archit awkward in ways that the Lotro story tends not to be awkward. And it's hard for me not to conclude that the reason for that is they just kind of, got more adept at that as they moved through.
And it does seem contrary to the idea that we're met with in Bree, the fact that the war has not reached here.
Right. Yes, exactly. Now, we'll get to, I want to follow that up a little bit, but I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the Chetwood. I want to get out into the Chetwood a little bit. But so there's not too much to see in burned down Archit here.
I know. That awesome tavern with awesome signs burnt down.
Yeah, what was it? It was the Badger, wasn't it?
Drunken Badger?
The Drunken Badger, yeah.
What was it?
The Drunken Badger.
Mad Badger. The Mad Badger, and
right,
here it is.
The Mad Badger.
There's the sign on the ground. It is so cool.
I want to see the sign.
Yeah, it's down here by the mailbox.
Right, yes.
Best pub sign ever.
Hey, look, the badger's standing on its head.
Yes.
Just like the cow and the horses.
Yes, he does have that sort of feel.
Yeah, that's cool. All right. So let's see. Anything that we can learn from, of course, we can see architecturally, very much like Bree, stone and wood houses, of course, a little too much on the wood side. What with the fire? This fountain is interesting. Doesn't this fountain look really old?
Yeah. It's got like the rust deposits under the spouts.
Yeah. This fountain looks super old compared to the rest of the town.
It's not flammable like the rest of the town.
Right. But yeah, what's this over here? Just a random pile of...
It's a stick. What is that, a bush?
Why is there a random plinth here in the middle of the alley? What's up with this?
Looks like it was part of some support thing.
Weird.
I don't know. They were their horse rings.
Strange architecture here arch it.
It's basically the half timber stuff like we saw.
Right, exactly. Like though we don't get as many stone buildings because, of course, we don't have as much of there's no evidence of any, apart possibly from the fountain, we don't get any evidence of Númenórean building here in Archet. The whole thing.
There's hardly any masonry.
Yeah, from the wooden palisade to the largely Tudor-style wooden buildings. We get some, like this building is a stone building, but this building is all made of that darker native stone that we saw in Bree, not the stuff that looks like recycled ruin.
Yeah.
Things. Now, we do get, there's a ruin over there, right? So I know that there's one separate, but my point is, Archet is not itself built on a ruin.
It's like
Bree obviously is.
Yeah, it's like they didn't want to... Hang on, I gotta kill some guys so they don't hurt our new friend.
Yeah. You gotta be
but they didn't want to take... Yeah. They didn't want to take advantage of like the pre-made structure to build upon that.
Yeah. Yeah.
In either case, here or the roost. You know?
Yeah, and you can see the ruin here, the Arnorian structure, clearly much more of it's not exactly very fortification-ish. It's built up on a hill, but this looks, with all these columns, it's not walled. This is a sort of a pleasure building, isn't it?
Yeah, this definitely looks like a palace more than a...
Colonnades and open...
The fortress is on the other side, where the Blackfolds are.
Yes.
That's the fortified part. This is definitely more, look at this beautiful colonnade. Look at this...
this is for...
This high tower.
Is for the view, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Ah, the lovely fertile valley. Yeah. Yeah, all these different kind of terraces building up.
Oh, yeah, and the big rotunda at the top.
Yeah, exactly. Right, whereas, as we can see straight ahead, we can see a Númenórean, an Arnorian wall.
Uh-huh.
And a tower there? What is this, a watchtower?
Oh, where are you? Where are you? Everyone's on the top of the rotunda. Where'd you go?
I went galloping off. I just saw a ruin in the distance and started making for it. Sorry. I'm up.
I'd hate to be on vacation with you someday. You're going to be like this in England, aren't you? You're just... Where did the professor go? Oh, he's just,
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Here I am. I'm
fell
in
the Thames. I don't know.
I'm on the road in the open here.
On the road in the open. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I went herring off towards it. See ruin in the distance. You know, that's what's. Yeah. What else 73 was just saying I was looking for an Oliphant to walk under. Ha ha ha. That's right.
Man, I can't. You get to London, you're going to be like a ferret with pixie sticks.
Oh, man.
Just looking at all these things.
I love it. I love it.
I used to live there. I used to live in Golders Green.
Cool.
Yep. Highly recommend Hampstead Heath. It's one of the nicest parks, I think, that I've been to. And they have a nice replica of a Roman colonnade you can just walk around in.
Yeah. Neat. I'm trying to figure out this over here. Like, that over there is simple enough, right? This is clearly, as you were saying, the fortification that the other one is not. So the other one is the, a little, like, I don't know what, jumbo gazebo or whatever. This is a fortification. We've got our seven seven-pointed stars above the wall. We've got the Arnorian star and the scepter of Illuminus up in the keystones.
Yep.
We've even got our little brambles, lining that. So we're seeing all the things that we've seen before, like in the Barrow Downs and other places. I'm trying to figure this thing out. What the heck is this? Why do we have this over here? What's a tower doing over here?
Watchtower for the fortress, I suppose.
I guess. I mean, it's slightly higher ground. It just seems if you're going to build a watchtower.
There's another one on the other side of the valley, too.
Is there?
Yes. I tried to get up there once and I couldn't do it, but...
Like way over by the valley? So, like
yeah,
over by
yeah,
Arches?
you can see it from here. You can see it from here.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, on the other side of the
the valley.
Of the
whole out.
Right. It's like on the side of the lake.
Uh-huh. Well, not just the... Oh, that's where the fortifications to stop them from getting into our shit. No, look across... look west from here.
Right. Okay.
Look where I'm pointing.
I don't see a ruin. Okay.
I have my graphics on really low. Maybe that's it.
Maybe there's a ruin over there.
Oh, there is. I'm just sure you can't. Oh, there's trees in the way. That's why. Okay.
Yeah, I'm seeing trees. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it's because my graphics are set so low because I didn't want to freeze up.
Right.
But yeah, there are on the cliffs on the other side of the valley, another set of fortifications similar to these, and it makes you feel like the fortifications are like protecting something, but the big stuff on the edge of the valley is sort of keeping watch and protecting the valley.
Right. Did there used to be? Are we supposed to understand there was a wall across this whole valley? Like, was
Maybe.
this meant to guard a frontier or something?
Maybe it was like the palace in the middle was like the castle, and everything else was the village that was inside the fortifications.
Maybe. JJ is right. The moon is coming down onto the hilltop. It looks like the man in the moon is heading to the prancing pony here pretty soon.
Yeah, no, that one's got a beer belly.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a very full moon.
Definitely. Okay, so here within, let's go into the ruin here. Let's look inside the fortification.
Okay. I better take point then. Wolfguard.
Let's see. Here we go. All right. So these dudes that we get in here. Ooh, look at that big old Scepter of Illuminus up there. So within these ruins, we get brigands, right? The Black Wolves.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, the story of the Black Wolves is kind of interesting, right? We know that brigandage is going to become an issue, right?
Yeah. Brigandage?
Brigandage, yeah.
Sounds burglarious.
Doesn't it? That's a great word. I love that word. You're almost like obligated if you use the word brigandage to also use the word outlawry, which are both really fun words. But yes, because the Black Wolves participate in all manner of brigandage and outlawry, and anyway, it's fun. So I like the way that we get these encampments, right? And it makes all kinds of sense that if you do have a brigand problem, right, that your brigands are going to be holding up and all. They have all of these convenient ruins all over the place. That the ruins of Old Arnor are going to provide a lot of hideouts for local brigands, and I think that's a really interesting element of the story. I think that the brigands that we get in, by the end when we are told in the Return of the King, that they had a real set to in Bree, and that they've been having a problem with robbers around. it makes all kinds of sense that they would already have been beginning to be a problem. Now, the really interesting thing is the choice that they make to have the local outlaws not just be from the south, but from the north, right? One of the things that you can see in the Bree story as they unfold it here is that we get the influence of both sides, right? We get the southern influence of the people coming up from Isengard, the White Hand folks who are, some of the people coming up the Greenway are honest refugees, as we've seen, but not all of them are. Some of them are actual spies and troublemakers in league with Saruman. And that's the story that I expected. So I was totally unsurprised to find brigands around here, and I thought that was cool. I'm like, okay, they're out here on the outskirts. They're having more problems with them here in Archit, but it hasn't gotten to Bree yet. It will, soon, but it hasn't yet. And I like that. But they go a step beyond that by having the brigands here being connected to Angmar in the north. Now, as I'm recalling, in the epic quest lines at the beginning, it's not that Angmar has caused the brigands. Angmar is recruiting the brigands, right? So Angmar is reaching out from the north, and they're trying to recruit the brigands to sort of help to further their own ends down here. Yes, exactly, JJ. So that's what I recalled. The Blackwolds are the locals. And I really liked that, too, because what we see in that overall plot line is essentially a sort of a parallel to, or even a kind of rehashing of, or actually a very sort of Tolkienian parallel, the sort of figurative thing that Tolkien does all the time, where you have a story, back in the First Age happening with like really big characters like Fingon rescuing Maedhros, and then you have almost the same exact story played out again in the Third Age, where this time it's Frodo rescuing Sam from the Tower of Cirith Ungol. But it's, very deliberately parallel and almost the same thing. But so, these kinds of stories that repeat themselves again and again, though often getting sort of smaller in scale as we move forward. And it seems to me that the story that they build in the epic quest line in the game about the relationship between Angmar and the local gang of brigands here in the Chetwood does the same kind of thing, right? Just as the Witch King of Angmar comes down and influences the people of Rhudaur and the Hillmen, there.
Yeah, sort of Mendelbrot storytelling.
Yeah, exactly. We get that kind of relationship.
Sort of microcosms of the same stories.
I think that's really cool.
That's really cool, yeah.
But anyway, okay, so we've got somebody's seeing carvings. I need to find it. Oh, over here.
Okay. Oh, yep, those are our friends from
didn't we
from
see
the Barrow Downs?
In the Barrow Downs. That's what I thought. I don't think. Do we see them in this configuration? 3 of them next to each other like this?
I think so.
They're similar. I don't remember.
Back in the Bone Man's Palace, I think it was on the South Barrow Downs.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. I couldn't figure out what the heads looked like, whether it was an armor or whether it was some sort of skull.
Yeah. No, this is obviously armor. They're not crowned. They could just be warriors, but of course we know the crown of Gondor was a helm, helm, winged helm. Yeah. So this could well be, the most obvious suggestion would be Elendil Isildur and Anarion, but Excuse me, I don't know.
Well, you're talking about history repeating itself. These might have been another father and sons group that
it's possible.
Of similar fame.
It's possible. The reason I'm skeptical that this would be Elendil, Isildur, and Inarian is that they're almost identical, these three.
Yeah.
I'd expect Elendil to be a little more prominent if it's that grouping of three, you know? Mm-hmm. Now, they do seem to have the 7 stars around their heads there.
Yeah.
Which, you know, would certainly seem to mark them as Númenórean.
Maybe they have close resemblance.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily prove that it's, you know, Elendil, Isildur, and Inarian, but...
That's true. Also keep in mind the fact that if they are Númenórean, their ages might not reflect as much. The father might look very similar to his sons.
Sure, yeah, and Amathorn, of course, just points out very correctly that Elendil was quite tall. Yes, I wouldn't necessarily expect in a set of carvings like this for them to have for the carvings to be that verisimilitudinous. Sorry, I made that word up, but it's one of my favorite words that I made up because I always thought there really needed to be an adjectival form of verisimilitude. Mm-hmm. So I look forward for weeks for opportunities to use the adjective verisimilitudinous. But anyway, I don't think that they would be that verisimilitudinous. They wouldn't be, if someone's making a statue of two, especially framed the way these are, right? Mm-hmm. You're not going to have Elendil be like 4 inches taller than Isildur or whatever, you know. Like
that's true.
I wouldn't really expect.
That's true. Yeah. But also look at the grouping. There's just these 3, and then there's nothing else in the entire building. So these 3 obviously are meant to be
right,
possibly different. But also, as an artist, I like to take shortcuts and use copy paste a lot. So
right, they do seem to be very similar.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, look, they're using the same themes everywhere here, so...
Yeah.
Probably have a stencil.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's likely that it's meant to suggest the 3 of them, even if they're not really differentiated in the... Mm-hmm. In the carvings.
Yes, we've seen throughout history that, you know, artist interpretations don't always reflect life.
Right. Right. And there could even be a symbolic function to having them look almost identical, right? To be representing, you know, those 3 kings, you know, the 3 Númenórean family members that came over.
The 3 kingdoms united.
Exactly. And, you know, to sort of show them as sort of peers rather than as hierarchical in that way.
Rivals.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so, and we see, I've been talking about the Chetwood, but of course we're not actually in the Chetwood. We're still in the greater Archet area here.
Yeah, we have to go back out to
Coombe. Yeah.
Coombe, yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're running low on time. Let's continue. Let's finish Archet, and then we can go out to the environs next time. I'm now headed over to the lake. I want to head over to the spidery bits of the ruins.
Yep. We'll have to definitely do that on foot.
Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know that we want to actually enter the cave, but I still retain bad memories of that cave from back when I was like level 9.
Did you stumble across that big spider before you were ready to?
Oh, did I ever? Yeah, I didn't die. I didn't die, but I ran screaming from the cave, kiting like 15 or 20 spiders behind me.
I see one of those every now and then. It brings back memories.
Yeah. Yeah, so this sort of maze is kind of interesting. Again, trying to figure, the kind of layers within layers of walls and and I love the guy who's like, careful, there are spiders here, and there's like spiders crawling all around him.
Yeah, think, bud. Yeah, it's almost like it was designed so people could wait behind things to get them as they pass through.
Yeah, like this is a very tightly guarded pass or like concentric defense.
The bottleneck technique.
Yeah, and I'm trying to I don't totally get it, like why it should be like trying to understand the kind of, especially since, as we saw, the town that's on the other side, and here we get the palisade wall, right, which is just the modern arched wall, and the buildings behind it are the modern wood as well. So was this where they were guarding from or to, like, what? Anyway, I'm just like yeah,
it does sort of imply there was something. There's like something. It does imply that Archid is built on something we don't see.
Yeah, it really kind of does, and especially with the location up here in the corner, you'd think this would be a charming little defensive position.
But it burnt down, fell over, and sank into the swamp, kind of thing.
Right, exactly. Oh, and yes, the gate is not here in the intro area. It's only here.
Well, it wasn't a gate. It was just a. That's just a gap.
It's just a wall. It's a gap that's been made in the wall. Exactly. After
But the only thing they have around them, which is trees.
Yes. Yeah, in the battle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing that didn't burn.
Now, Archit has an enormous jail again.
Yeah.
Archit is a small little village, and the prison is like the biggest building in the whole village. Really?
Yeah, it makes you wonder if it's multifunctional. It's like it's the jail, it's also the function house, it's also where we hold the balls. It's just
right, exactly. It's where everybody has their wedding receptions, in the prison, like you do.
At the historic Archit jail yard.
Exactly. They probably have a craft brewery or something in here. I don't know.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. It burned down. Now, see, look, they did.
No, they got barrels stuff
look
over
at
here.
That. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Craft brewery over here. Totally.
Yeah, you called it.
Yeah, figured. Okay. Yeah,
No, it says that it's the jail yard, but that doesn't necessarily mean everything here is the jail, though.
That's right. And it's not Archit in the opening sequence. It's not Archit where you're imprisoned, is it?
I don't actually know. It might be, actually, because yes, I think you came in through. So yeah, I guess you were in one of these, massive jails. It's like, is this a town or a penal colony?
Yeah, let's see.
You're right, because this is one of the gates you had to go through and then fight the brigands off over here. And crazy. I got a bit turned around, though, so I'm not quite sure. But
right, yeah, okay, because this is the courtyard with the old fountain. And then if I come around here and go back through this other gate.
It looked like this, but it wasn't this. I don't think it was actually part of this landscape. I think it was a landscape made out of similar jail yards and jail cells and stuff like that. But you can't access it here, or it's just made out of the same, the same Boolean images.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Good. O'Malley is pointing out that it says that Amdir escaped with his charges to Archit. So, okay, wait. Escaped. Wait. O'Malley, I'm not remembering that. So,
Yeah, at the very beginning, you guys escape to Archit. That's where you're seeking refuge after being rescued.
After Emdir is injured.
Yes.
Yes.
Tragic. And he gets injured, like, first off.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay.
See, that's a good one. It sets a precedent that the Rangers can't do anything right and will ask you to do everything.
Right. Exactly. And I did always really like how they use Amdir to as an anticipation, right, of Frodo's wound. So you can actually see what we're told that, it's really impressive how, Frodo holds up under his wound and does not succumb to it.
Yep.
And of course, in Amdir, we're shown the course of that kind of wound, normal.
After only a few days.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Whereas, Frodo bears it for weeks. So, yeah. Okay. All right. So it's not in the Archit jail that you are incarcerated in the opening sequence. It's just somewhere in the Blackwold's camp.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we are getting towards the end of our time. It's midnight now. I should probably It's getting late. I should let people go. We will search around the environs around the villages, having now explored each of the Breeland villages. We'll sort of see what they're doing in the landscape around and how they've set up the land, the sort of the land of Bree, not just the village of Bree. So thanks everybody for joining me. Tomorrow night I'll be back for the War of the Ring. We'll be talking about the Voice of Saruman, finishing part 1 of the War of the Ring. So that'll be cool. That's 10 p.m. tomorrow evening, Wednesday night. Assuming I still have power, we're going to be getting a foot of snow tomorrow night. So
good luck.
There's a non-zero chance that I'll lose power, in which case class will be suddenly canceled. But hopefully, we will we'll sort it. But anyway, so we'll see what happens. But so Lord willing, and I don't lose power, I'll be back tomorrow night, 10 p.m. for Mythgard Academy, War of the Ring, and we're going to continue. We've got Silmfilm and Grifflet back again this Friday, so that'll all be good. So hopefully see you guys again soon, and thanks for joining us. Good night now.
Bye guys.
Bye. Thanks for joining me on this epic exploration of The Lord of the Rings and of Standing Stone's video adaptation of Tolkien's story. If you are having even half the fun I'm having on this journey, I hope you will consider supporting the project by donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.